a message from the World of Warcraft team, which is basically them talking about the evolution of content within the game. So let's just talk through this. Over the last few weeks, artists and writers across the WoW team have updated a small number of old quests, art assets, names, and dialogue that we identified as outdated and consistent with our values as a team. Now that's going to mean things like painting of lady turned into fruit, the twin consorts fight being renamed twin Empyreans, a few other things. Masturbator's gone now because... yeah, it's gone now. I don't know. These updates are a relatively small part of a comprehensive company-wide effort to improve the WoW team and Blizzard as a whole, but they're important to us as developers. So that's, I think, the first thing here. It's becoming more and more clear that this is actually not about the game itself.
Yeah.
This is more about what they are comfortable with at work.
Yeah,
and
company
that
culture.
sort of thing. Company culture. So I think they're just taking the view that in a company where, bros before ho-ho-hos is a joke, that I guess that's not the company culture that they sort of want to have. Same goes with an NPC called Master Baiter, which... I mean, at least, bros before ho-ho-hos, I can kind of understand a bit more than Master Baiter, the fishing NPC, because that one is, I guess, a bit more gendered. But I mean, Master Baiter...
Yeah,
it's not just men who do that.
It's interesting because I think like the gender nature of it's interesting. Where bros before ho-ho-hos, ho is a derogatory term for women in places, so that I understand. But when it comes to my sack is gigantic and masturbator is like, those are just juvenile jokes, which I imagine they're juvenile jokes that come from maybe staff members or maybe a culture that they kind of don't like anymore or don't want anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's what I think anyway.
Pretty much, I think that's what's going on. You're seeing them kind of update a lot of their things where they're happy for the plot lines of the game to be very, very edgy, very, very, very serious, very 14-year-old sort of red Nietzsche is kind of the joke that people make. That's kind of where they're pushing their plot. But then for all character-related stuff, they're really trying to soften things up and to make things feel a lot more wholesome. And I guess maybe a lot more sort of pure feeling. So we're kind of left in this kind of world where it's like... It seems like they're going to try to make a lot of the characters and the social dynamics of the Warcraft world feel really quite soft as compared to how they used to be, perhaps. I would then just say, like, sure, you can do that as the direction for the game, but that can be a little bit tricky when the plot line feels... when the plot line feels as if, Dave and Dan from Game of Thrones are kind of coming in and trying to make it all, as sort of big and edgy and shocking as they can.
Yeah.
So that's the bit I think from a player perspective feels weird, but then you got to remember that I think... These are beginning to be more and more evidently not made for players, which I think is why a bunch of players, not just men, why I think a bunch of players are maybe puzzled or confused by these updates. So to continue, in a game that has thousands of art elements and a word count in the millions, we recognize these updates will amount to a very few, just a small amount of total changes overall. Nonetheless, we believe these changes are worthwhile. World of Warcraft is meant to evolve over time, and every day, new players from every walk of life and every corner of the world experience our in-game content for the very first time. As a team, we want the world they see to stand as an expression of our talents and principles. Goofy jokes and occasional mature innuendos are part of WoW, and probably always will be. Still, we want to be mindful of whether certain jokes are welcoming to all players. In short, we want our jokes to be inclusive and not punched down. In that case, it's like, sure, but like, why is an NPC called Master Baiter? Like, that is inclusive and doesn't punch down. It's just a stupid bit of wordplay, which then makes you think, is it actually the case that the person who implemented the NPC called Master Baiter turns out they have loads of HR complaints, and then that's the reason why that bit of content is going. In which case, that is evidently not a change being made for players. It is a change being made for internal purposes.
Yeah, so I think under that circumstance, you can kind of go, if they were hyper transparent about that, as much as legally, capable, saying, "Hey, so there's a couple things that we think are well within reason for what we consider goofy jokes and mature innuendos, but we're going out of our way to remove things that we feel are inappropriate because they were implemented by people who cause harm at the company. So for the sake of developers and those involved, we're removing those." I think, if possible, a statement like that could be very helpful in kind of stopping the stuff of the kind of the puritanical approach that people are coming at, because I can sort of see that coming through some of their changes. Is very much feels like that. But then there's other changes where they in Karazhan, in the Den of Mortal Delights, you can see they aren't necessarily opposed to that. So it's kind of like, if they could be hyper clear on their principles, then people would at least know what to actually disagree with that the developers also disagree with. But I guess that's just a question of clarity more than anything else.
Yeah. So to continue, occasionally when determining whether to adjust content, there can be circumstances that further complicate our decision making. For example, some of the art that populates our world is often reused throughout the game. To be certain we don't have any instances in which this art appears in a way that is not respectful, in some cases we might opt to replace specific elements entirely. I'm guessing that's referring to those paintings. Mm-hmm. Maybe they feel that those paintings were okay in some instances, less okay in others, and just swap the image file, done. It's important to us that we ensure Azeroth is the best place it can be for everyone, and we will continue to improve our processes when it comes to this kind of decision making. See, I think then what people want to know with that is, you can see how that's an agreeable statement, but then if that is a sort of a point of creative intent, well, are there times where you want Azeroth to actually not be a nice place? And that's where it gets a little bit tricky, because we've got Sylvanas doing her things with Teldrassil, etc., etc. So how does it all mesh together? As an example, like, in, say, FF14, it does incorporate aspects of, sexuality, probably a few gendered things as well, but it generally does that in a way that feels consistent in the world, that feels like it's an actual story that realistically could be taking place within that world, and it's in a situation where it's there, it's in the world, but obviously things that are in the world created by developers don't have to be things that the developers agree with.
Of course, yeah.
Because, if you're making a world that is just full of, stuff that perfectly conforms to what you think, that's going to be a pretty boring world. If your kind of villains end up feeling a little bit sanitized, or, there's no sort of seedy underbelly to the societies that you create in your game, then it's not going to feel that real to people, and, they won't kind of... Maybe you won't get those, won't get the vibes that it's a very complete world. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things from my reading online that people are a little concerned about, or they're maybe not sure exactly what the WoW team mean. Is this just Azeroth talking about, like, the game world we're in, not having, overly offensive content in it, or stuff that is, things that were implemented by people who have had a sordid past? Or is that to do with the nature of the in-game content? Like creatively, I think it's definitely the former, not the latter. But I think quite a few people are concerned that it may be the latter.
Yeah, that's what it comes across to me. Like, it's the kind of thing where if you have a tonal inconsistency between the two layers of your game, you're going to have that sense of dissonance will just come across to players, where you'll be doing a quest, and even if it's like one of the ones in Ardenweald where there are character deaths that people may feel about. You're like, oh, well, that was pretty harsh. Oh, that was, someone was possessed. Oh, that's actually, if you think about that, that's really a horrid thing to happen. It's one thing's bad enough to die, but to die in service of something you don't agree with because of possession, that's horrendous. But then if you go back and you're like, oh, well, there's everything else is squeaky clean, and I'm not allowed to use certain emotes or emotes I used to use that I now remove because they weren't clean enough, then you kind of run into the problem of just people aren't going to feel at home in that world, the world of the story, if that's not where they spend their time.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. It's a tricky situation because it is one that's really been spurred on by this kind of the context of obviously all this terrible shit coming out about what Blizzard was actually like for a very long period of time. I think it's just the sort of thing it's probably reasonable to expect a mild overcorrection at the start and, probably just kind of let it pass, let them find their feet. And, it's a sort of thing where, if the next expansion comes out and it really feels like it's, kind of being like, babied down, but then super made like complex with like, new crazy lore and it all feels super dissonant, then maybe that's the time to be like, whoa, what's going on with the creative direction here? But I think for the most part, this is them making changes for an internal sake.
Yeah.
That, has here been sort of communicated to players, but I think in a way where there's probably quite a lot of context here that we're not aware of.
Definitely.
And perhaps context they're maybe not even really sort of able to share in a sort of professional way. To continue, though, we want players to be able to express themselves through their characters, so we don't intend to change existing looks or cosmetics. Now, that is good. There's a decent amount of skimpy armor in the game. A lot of that is from the past. That is armor that is, from looking around Twitter, not only enjoyed by men. In fact, a very broad, diverse amount of people, liked to use the more skimpy armor. They were worried that Blizzard were basically kind of making it, World of Warcraft none edition. And does seem like in this case, that's not going to be happening. So some people will definitely be happy about that. Instead, we want to ensure we're offering a wide range of options for players to represent themselves. Again, that is, I think, exactly what we would almost all agree with. This work is ongoing alongside our development of new content and features. You're going to see it more of it soon in 9.1.5 and in updates to come, and where applicable in WoW Classic as well. An example of a post 9.1.5 improvement is the creation of an incubus demon. Basically, succubus, like hot sexy woman demon, incubus, hot sexy man demon. Yeah. That's what they're at. So, it's kind of like demons who are, have a very similar vibe. In a future patch, you will be able to glyph into having an incubus if that is what what you want to use, and I think that's great. That's purely additive, gives more people just ways for their expression. So I think that's great. It's definitely the way to do it. Add in more skimpy armor, add in a male sexy demon, add in this, add in that. Just give people more options, I suppose. So that's definitely good. And they say, as WoW continues to grow and evolve, we'll keep discussing, reviewing, and acting this kind of feedback. As always, we're immeasurably grateful for your input, and we hope you keep it coming. So there's that.
Sound.
There's the one thing there just to also talk about. The player feedback influenced many gameplay improvements in patch 9.1.5. Then they had their own internal feedback set up. To deal with this, right? So from what I understand, they've basically changed up some of their internal communication policies to perhaps allow for a little bit more sort of decentralized command, a little bit more individual action. And, you're seeing some of that being taken here, but I think you're also seeing some of that being taken in the form of player feedback actually being listened to and actioned on, which is certainly a good thing because 9.1.5 will make World of Warcraft significantly better. Certainly. That's almost an undeniable fact. Now, whether it will make it good enough for you to want to play it, that's entirely besides the point, but I think everybody could agree that 9.1.5 is a universal improvement. So, that's that. I don't really know if there's much else to say.
No, I think there's really not much. Just, incubi good, because make things for everyone. Don't take things away. Make everyone happy. There you go.
Don't shy away from there being sexuality in the game. Like, there's sexuality in the players of the game. There's sexuality in, the world and in this world, right? So, don't see this, Blizz, and sort of think that, like, the way to go is to, like, kind of turn all sex negative on it. I don't think that's really the way forward. I think, actually include, if you want more sort of sexual elements in the game, but, just do it in an actually adult and mature way. Not in a kind of a schoolyard joke way, which is maybe how some of that was handled in the past. So if you're going to sort of use this to turn a new leaf, I would say don't see that as bad stuff. See that as more aspects of the human experience that can be a valid part of your world, that can be interesting for your characters and interesting for just the richness of the world, and then just approach it with tact and maturity, and sort of do it justice, right? Push it forward, sort of respond to bad things by fixing them up, and then pushing forward with good things rather than just kind of like taking away and sanitizing.
Yeah.
I think that's what will be creatively more interesting.
Yeah, so I think the kind of the jury on some of their approaches out until they introduce more elements that would be, more along the lines of a succubi or the painting in its original form. See if they actually add anything in that to sort of show they're not sex negative and, at least as far as the, preferring women kind of angle. Because there is a fear. I think some people will be afraid that they would be adding specifically to counteract, and then they'll never add any more. So the case of, instead of removing the succubus, they'll add the incubi. Same in the Den of Mortal Lights. Same in the Karazhan. They'll do that and then stay puritanical or sex negative in their additions from here on. But based on their willingness to do that and not to blanket change it away, I think they're probably... I just can't see a world where they are all in agreement that they should not add things in that, like, in the future. At least I think so anyway.
Yeah.
It's hard to know for sure for now, but obviously they aren't going completely mental and going, no, everything hot needs to be ripped out.
Yeah.
Or they would have done it already, I think.
Yeah, like more options is good. Like even for male characters, let people be less muscly if they want. Also let them be big Frank Frazetta, complete muscle bound, only wearing a few strips of leather, He-Man or Conan the Barbarian looking things. Yeah. Let them be that as well. I would just say, open it the fuck up and just let your players do shit. I think that's totally the way to go.
Yeah. So
if somebody wants to be Crowman the Barbarian, just let him.
Yeah, and where's those the skinny Kulterans? The really ones, the real stick-like ones. Yeah, that's what the people need.
Aye, indeed. So there you go. There's that. Right. Let's move on.